Book of Omni. All right.
Behold, it came to pass that I, Omni, being commanded by my father, Jarom, that I should write somewhat upon these plates to preserve our genealogy. Wherefore, in my days, I would that ye should know that I fought much with the sword to preserve my people the Nephites from falling into the hands of their enemies the Lamanites. But behold, I of myself am a wicked man, and I have not kept the statutes and the commandments of the Lord as I ought to have done. And it came to pass that 276 years had passed away, and we had many seasons of peace, and we had many seasons of serious war and bloodshed. Yea, and in fine, 282 years had passed away, and I had kept these plates according to the commandments of my fathers, and I conferred them upon my son Amaron, and I make an end.
And there you have the end of the book of Omni. Just that easy, see? It says, three verses and done. Okay, I make an end and I'm giving them over to my son, right? So now what's different about Omni from perhaps even any of the other boxes that we drew here?
He was not a godly man.
Right, that's what he says. He says he refers to himself as a wicked man, not following the commandments of God, right? As you read it, I mean, he was perhaps being honest as he looked at himself and not following the statutes of God. But yet, he was still used to help, I'll say, fight in the army. All right, so I mean, I think he had some honor about him, and he hung on to these plates and did what was asked of him by his father, that he kept the plates up and he maintained them. He passed them to his son. So so he's not all bad, is what I'm getting at, right? And he used the word. He was respectful, right? That's good, right? He was respectful of what his father asked him to do, and like I said, as we typically refer to as an honorable thing, to like fight in the military for your, to protect your land. So it says, he did these things, and he wrote a little bit, and you see how much time passed, right? Because from the end of the other one, we said it was 238 years had passed away, and now we're up to 282 years, so the 40-some years have passed. So so he's held on to the plates all this time, and now he says at the end of his life, he's going to give them over to his son Amaron. Right? So he's done after 3 verses. So we need another box. So Amaron. These guys write so little, I got to give them little boxes. Okay.
And now I, Amaron, write the things whatsoever I write, which are few, in the book of my father. Behold, it came to pass that 320 years had passed away, and the more wicked part of the Nephites were destroyed. For the Lord would not suffer, after he had led them out of the land of Jerusalem, and kept and preserved them from falling into the hands of their enemies, yea, he would not suffer that the words should not be verified, which he spake unto our fathers, saying that inasmuch as ye will not keep my commandments, ye shall not prosper in the land.
Yeah, Amaron, perhaps looking at what the others have written, and he almost sounds similar, right? So my name is Amaron. I'm just going to write a little bit to keep the record going. But notice as he's describing in verse 6 what's going on, all right, during the time of his life. Where have you heard that sentence before, right? The sentence at the end of verse 6. Okay, it was in the book of Jarom, right? That we just read it. I'm sure it's something that was taught by their family, even from generation to generation, right? The father taught the son this and so forth. That inasmuch as we keep the commandments, we prosper in the land. If we don't keep the commandments, we don't prosper in the land. So Jarom would be his grandfather. And we're moving so fast, it's hard to think of him as the grandfather. But this was something that was passed on through the ages of the family. They would understand that this is what God's expectations were for this land.
Wherefore the Lord did visit them in great judgment. Nevertheless he did spare the righteous, that they should not perish, but did deliver them out of the hands of their enemies. And it came to pass that I did deliver the plates unto my brother Chemish. Now I, Chemish, write what few things I write, in the same book with my brother. For behold, I saw the last which he wrote, that he wrote it with his own hand, and he wrote it in the day that he delivered them unto me. And after this manner we keep the records, for it is according to the commandments of our fathers, and I make an end.
In 7, right, is Amaron's finishing up his writing, all right? As he's talked about, you prosper in the land if you keep the commandments. Says, those who did not, it says the Lord did visit them in great judgment, right? But he spared the righteous that they should not perish. So, it's consistent with what we're saying tonight, that at a time of war and battles, he was preserving those who were righteous and not putting that same protection on those who were not, right? So it says, those who perished, that they were the unrighteous at that time. Right? So that's what Amron has to say. Now it says he's going to pass it to his brother Chemish. So let's write another name. That's his brother. All right, so we can write that to the side, which helps. Okay, so there's Chemish, and he writes one verse. Okay, he's the record holder. Right here, he's saying, hey, my brother wrote a few things, and guess what? I looked at the date. He wrote it the day he gave it to me. In other words, he had it sitting there all those years, and when he's going to turn it over, he figured, well, I can't write nothing, so I got to write something. So he wrote something down, which is the equivalent of verses 4 to 7 or 8. And then he gave it to me the same day. So so here, Chemish had one verse to write, and he used half of it to tattle on his brother. Okay. So, yeah, that's pretty much what he says, right? Because at the end, it just says, after this manner we keep the records, for it's according to the commandments of our fathers. So again, I'm only doing this because our fathers told us that we need to keep this up, and so we're keeping it up. And so yeah, I suspect most of these guys were not very, I'll say, godly type men, but they were respect for their parents or grandparents. They kept them up, and then they passed them on. Now it's going to go on to the next person, which, as I look ahead, is named Abinadab, the son of Chemish. So he goes down here.
He didn't even get an introduction.
That's right.
That's another interesting thing. Chemish never said that he passed it on, and Abinadab never said he received it.
Right.
Behold, I, Abinadab, am the son of Chemish. Behold, it came to pass that I saw much war and contention between my people, the Nephites and the Lamanites, and I with my own sword have taken the lives of many of the Lamanites in the defense of my brethren. And behold, the record of this people is engraven upon plates which is had by the kings, according to the generations, and I know of no revelation, save that which has been written, neither prophecy, wherefore that which is sufficient is written, and I make an end.
This one is a 2-verse writer, right? But now this one would seem to me, based on what Brother Josh just said, see that now he's making reference to the revelations and the prophecies. So it sounds like this one is maybe a little more on the righteous side, right? He says, and I looked over the record, and so I don't know of any other revelation or prophecies other than what's written, so I have nothing to add in that regard, right? So he is making that comment that I've already read over it, which by itself means that he had some level of righteousness to even read it. And he says, now I'm not aware of anything new that I can add to that, so I'm not going to take up any extra space. That was Abinadab, right? So he's passing on to Amaleki, and I believe he's the last writer for this chapter, right? So let's write his name on here. Oh, I just made it before I even hit the floor.
Behold, I am Amaleki, the son of Abinadab. Behold, I will speak unto you somewhat concerning Mosiah, who was made king over the land of Zarahemla. For behold, he being warned of the Lord that he should flee out of the land of Nephi, as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord should also depart out of the land with him into the wilderness. And it came to pass that he did according as the Lord had commanded him. And they departed out of the land into the wilderness, as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord, and they were led by many preachings and prophesyings. And they were admonished continually by the word of God, and they were led by the power of his arm through the wilderness, until they came down into the land which is called the land of Zarahemla. And they discovered a people who were called the people of Zarahemla. Now there was great rejoicing among the people of Zarahemla, and also Zarahemla did rejoice exceedingly, because the Lord had sent the people of Mosiah with the plates of brass, which contained the record of the Jews.
Amaleki is being the right now, right? He's talking about actually another group of people he became aware of. Right? And so he was sharing a little bit of information about them with us. And now he says, I want to speak to you concerning a man named Mosiah, all right? And later on you're going to see a book called the Book of Mosiah, but that's not this Mosiah. Okay, just so you're aware of that, okay? But it's actually, this is the grandfather of the one who's going to write in the Book of Mormon, right? But now it says this Mosiah was king over the land of Zarahemla, right? And so as you see, he's starting to tell his story a little bit and what these people did. It says they were warned of the Lord they should flee out of the land of Nephi. They told to flee that they might be preserved, right? So it says that they departed out of the land into the wilderness, right? And as you can see, it says they followed the voice of the Lord, the preaching, prophesying, and so forth. They discovered a people called the people of Zarahemla. So they discovered a group of people that were lost there, right? The people of Zarahemla, and so these people were just kind of living in the middle of nowhere, and now the people of Mosiah find them, right? And these people were excited because the people of Mosiah had something with them. The brass plates are the ones that they carried with them that had the writings of the prophets on there, right? The first 5 books of Moses and the writings of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and so forth, right? That's what they carried with them, and so that's where they learned a lot of the things that they knew, right? So they had that with them, and so because they had that with them and they shared it with these people of Zarahemla, they were excited about. I guess they hadn't seen that before. Maybe they had heard about it, but they hadn't seen it, so they were excited to have that shared with them.
Behold, it came to pass that Mosiah discovered that the people of Zarahemla came out from Jerusalem at the time that Zedekiah, king of Judah, was carried away captive into Babylon. And they journeyed in the wilderness and were brought by the hand of the Lord across the great waters into the land where Mosiah discovered them, and they had dwelt there from that time forth.
Zedekiah, he was the king at the time that the people were carried away captive into Babylon, right? And that occurred around the year 600 BC, or a little bit after that, right? And so Zedekiah was the king at the time that Lehi and his family left Jerusalem, so back at the beginning of the story. And they were warned, Lehi and his family were, to leave Jerusalem because they were going to be carried away captive into Babylon, and sure enough, that occurred even while Zedekiah was the king. All right, so there's this other group, this is not like now actually a separate group that was given the opportunity to leave Jerusalem about the same time. Right, so that's kind of the key point here, right? Is that these were not part of the Nephite people. Right, this was like a separate group that also left about the same time and escaped what would have happened to the rest of the people there when they were carried away captive into Babylon.
And at the time that Mosiah discovered them, they had become exceeding numerous. Nevertheless, they had many wars and serious contentions, and had fallen by the sword from time to time. And their language had become corrupted, and they had brought no records with them, and they denied the being of their Creator. And Mosiah, nor the people of Mosiah, could understand them. But it came to pass that Mosiah caused that they should be taught in his language. And it came to pass that after they were taught in the language of Mosiah, Zarahemla gave a genealogy of his fathers according to his memory, and they are written, but not in these plates. And it came to pass that the people of Zarahemla and of Mosiah did unite together, and Mosiah was appointed to be their king.
Now in 17, right, it says that these people, it says their language had become corrupted, they brought no records with them, right, it says they denied the being of their Creator, right, and so, yeah, they had no understanding of it because they had not been privy to this type of information. They didn't have anything they carried with them. In fact, I find it interesting that their language even had become corrupted. I guess that they would even had a hard time. Like Mosiah couldn't really even understand what they were saying when he first came upon them, right? So now, I mean, I find it interesting that then it says 18, he taught them in his language. So I mean, he must have been a pretty good teacher, right? Since he could hardly even communicate with them at first, and yet was able to get their attention well enough to teach them their language. They were able to then converse in the same language and eventually become one people, right? So it says as they learned, and they were able to share some information. Zarahemla gave a genealogy of his fathers according to his memory, and so we wrote it down, but not on this record, but on the other one, right? And so eventually the people came together, and Mosiah became the king of the combined group, right? So so again, kind of an interesting story of this King Mosiah and his people finding this almost random group of people who came over from Jerusalem around the same time that Lehi and his family did, and so they had the common roots, so to speak, but they were able to be taught in that language and have some understanding, and now they could see the brass plates and the information that was on there and get a little more understanding about God and prophecies and so forth.
And it came to pass in the days of Mosiah, there was a large stone brought unto him with engravings on it, and he did interpret the engravings by the gift and power of God. And they gave an account of one Coriantumr, and the slain of his people. And Coriantumr was discovered by the people of Zarahemla, and he dwelt with them for the space of 9 moons. It also spake a few words concerning his fathers, and his first parents came out from the tower at the time the Lord confounded the language of the people, and the severity of the Lord fell upon them according to his judgments, which are just, and their bones lay scattered in the land northward.
Now the people of Zarahemla are in possession of this large stone that is talking about in verse 20. Right? Verse 20 says, the large stone was brought to King Mosiah with engravings on it. Okay, so the people of Zarahemla had this stone because they got it from this man Coriantumr, who they discovered in his dying days, right? This Coriantumr, he was the last person alive from a whole other group of people, right? It said he lived with them for 9 moons, just like the Indians say, right? The 9 moons, and then he died. He was the last of a group of people, the Jaredite people, right? Whose history is recorded in the book of Ether, okay, which we'll be reading at a later date, right? It's towards the back of the book, even though it happened before the whole Book of Mormon, right? But the book of Ether records a record of people called the Jaredite people, and at the very end of that, it gets down to like 2 people. They had a big war, and even though they were killing each other left and right, they just kept fighting until it was down to one person left from each side. It was all that was left. And so finally, the one killed the other, and then Coriantumr was the last one living, but he was pretty wounded and beat up too. So he just with days to live. Somehow the people of Zarahemla came upon him, and then he died shortly thereafter. But then he left them this large stone that says with engravings on it, which was a history of their people. Okay, and so it eventually obviously became interpreted into a language that could be understood, right? And it's talking about people who came originally from the tower where the Lord confounded the language, and that tower is typically referred to as the Tower of Babel. Okay. So and when you read the Jaredite record, the book of Ether, that's where it starts. It starts at the Tower of Babel, that they had prayed that their language would not be confounded, and so they themselves, the Jaredites, were able to still speak to each other, and they left the land at that time. So they actually came to the Americas way prior to the Nephites, right? And that they lived here for a number of years, just them, and eventually they died out. But their paths crossed by one person, right? The last person of the Jaredites met up with this people of Zarahemla, and so that they were able to pass the record over, and so that's why we have the record available to us.
Behold, I, Amaleki, was born in the days of Mosiah, and I have lived to see his death, and Benjamin his son reigneth in his stead. And behold, I have seen in the days of King Benjamin a serious war, and much bloodshed between the Nephites and the Lamanites. But behold, the Nephites did obtain much advantage over them, yea, insomuch that King Benjamin did drive them out of the land of Zarahemla.
Okay, so he's continuing writing the history as he's observed it, right? So now he's talking about this King Mosiah. Eventually he passed away, and the kingdom is passed to his son Benjamin, right? Also known as King Benjamin, right? And now this king we are going to read more about, right? Because when we get to the book of Mosiah, leading off, there will be some of the words of King Benjamin, right? So that's really the key part here. Is that's how we know the family line there. That's how I knew that Mosiah was not the same Mosiah from the book of Mosiah, because King Benjamin, in fact, has a son named Mosiah, and that's the one that it's named after. Okay, so Malachi here records that King Benjamin took over, and then what he had to do here with this war between the Nephites and Lamanites, driving the Lamanites out of the land of Zarahemla, where they lived.
And it came to pass that I began to be old, and having no seed, and knowing King Benjamin to be a just man before the Lord, wherefore I shall deliver up these plates unto him, exhorting all men to come unto God, the Holy One of Israel, and believe in prophesying, and in revelations, and in the ministering of angels, and in the gift of speaking with tongues, and in the gift of interpreting languages, and in all things which are good, for there is nothing which is good, save it comes from the Lord, and that which is evil cometh from the devil. And now, my beloved brethren, I would that ye should come unto Christ, who is the Holy One of Israel, and partake of his salvation, and the power of his redemption. Yea, come unto him, and offer your whole souls as an offering unto him, and continue in fasting and praying, and endure to the end, and as the Lord liveth, ye will be saved.
In 25, as it came to pass, I began to be old, and having no seed, which means he has no children, all right, so he needs somebody to pass the records on to, all right, because again, the one thing we'll say about all these different people that had the records is, like I said, some were more prolific writers than others, and some were more spiritual than others, but they all took it seriously, the responsibility that, wow, this is like a family thing that's been passed down over hundreds of years, and so I'm not going to be the one that messes it up, right? That breaks the chain and so forth. So they each put something on the records, and then they found somebody who they thought was a good person to pass it on to. So here Malachi had no son, so he had nobody to pass it on to in the family. So he picks somebody else out. He says, King Benjamin is a just man. I'll entrust this to him. Okay, so So for the first time, it's going to go outside of the family here, right? So as a result, right? So. Okay, so he passes the records over to King Benjamin, who will then keep it going with his family and so forth. In the rest of these verses, it's kind of sharing things about the gospel itself. All right, as you see, it says that these are things that we want to do with our records, with our preaching and so forth. We want to exhort people to believe in prophecy, revelation, angels, gifts of tongues, and interpretation. Right? I mean, this is the basics of the gospel as we understand it, right? Because all things which are good is come from the Lord, right? So these are good things that we're talking about here. So these are all things that come from the Lord, right? And so of course in 26, then we start talking about Christ, that they should all come to Christ and that depend on Him for their salvation, right? And that so it talks about fasting and prayer, enduring to the end. All right, and so it's basically to put your hopes upon Christ. When they talk about trusting in Him and looking to Him, I mean, they're looking ahead to when He would come, and so it's not looking back, but really looking ahead. They didn't have the same advantage we have today that we know He came. They were trusting He would come at that point.
And now I would speak somewhat concerning a certain number who went up into the wilderness to return to the land of Nephi, for there was a large number who were desirous to possess the land of their inheritance. Wherefore they went up into the wilderness, and their leader being a strong and mighty man, and a stiff-necked man, wherefore he caused a contention among them, and they were all slain, save 50 in the wilderness, and they returned again to the land of Zarahemla. And it came to pass that they also took others to a considerable number, and took their journey again into the wilderness. And I, Amaleki, had a brother who also went with them, and I have not since known concerning them. And I am about to lie down in my grave, and these plates are full, and I make an end of my speaking.
This little story has nothing to do with anything else in the book, okay? So it's almost like, gee, why is this even there? Because the writer was just trying to write as complete a record as he could, all right? I mean, this is just a random episode. It talks about this number of people that they traveled away, and then a lot of them were killed. They came back. They took more people with them, and his brother went with them. So I think it just lends some reliability to what we're reading to know that it's just being complete in this particular level of history keeping. Okay, like I said, it has nothing to do with the story as a whole, but he's just keeping records of what happened to the people and whatever he could fit on these plates. Because now, as you see in verse 30. All right, it says as he's about to lie down in his grave, it says these plates are full. All right, so the plates are full, and so therefore he's done. And so I'm guessing he probably had just a little tiny bit of space, and so let me write this little story about what happened to these people, just so in case anybody's wondering what happened to them. And we'll write that down. That's all we got left. Now we have the large plates and the small plates, and so the small plates at this point are full. The large plates were originally being kept by Lehi. All right, and then when he died, then Nephi picked it up, and all these different writers that we've read about, they all wrote history on the large plates, right? And they were large. There's a lot of writing, a lot of history, a lot of detail was on the large plates. The small plates were started by Nephi, and it was done for a particular purpose, right? To give a more spiritual account, as was just said, and just to focus on the more spiritual aspects, things that would bless your soul and so forth, all right? So he wrote those kind of things on there. In some cases, there was probably, I'll say, duplication of events on the two, all right? Because certainly something that's covered here in a spiritual manner would find its way onto the big history also, all right? So in some cases, maybe they were duplicating, but this was the spiritual record. This was the more complete, his historical records. They were probably adding to this almost daily or weekly. They were adding on to this, whereas this was just when something special happened, then they put it on there. Now, all the writing that was led up to this point, from first Nephi all the way to what we just finished, is all from the small plates. Okay, it's all from the small plates. So the large plates were abridged. In fact, the same period of time that was covered by what we just read was abridged to 116 pages. Okay, all of which was lost when it was being translated. Right, so the abridgment of the large plates up to this point in time was lost. And so therefore, you see what the wise purpose was in having two sets of records, that the record on the small plates was able to fill in what would have been a missing piece of time in the Book of Mormon. Right? So the part we've read is the small plates, but now as you see, it's done with the small plates because now they're full. So now they're full, so no more small plates, I can be able to write in small plates any longer. So what we read after this would all be abridgment from the large plates.